morning from I stay in South Tangerang actually. It's suburb to Jakarta. And thank you for your time, Ken. As as we have prepared before, maybe the first thing we would like to hear from you, especially our audience, uh, we would like to hear about single-use plastic. Maybe you have some definition and some example, and why do you believe it should be banned?
Fantastic question, and a very, very important one too. Um, well, let's just take apart the word single-use plastic.
Yeah,
What does single-use mean? It means to use something only one time. And what about plastic? Well, what is plastic? Plastic is basically a mix of chemicals, many of which are toxic, and oil.
yeah,
A great way that I like to explain this is with food. Imagine roti biasa flatbread. Okay,
yeah,
so when you make roti flatbread, you need salt, flour, and water.
yeah,
Well, if you have only flour in your hand, it's not bread, it's just flour. You need to mix them together and they create a bread. It's the same, well, it's very similar with plastics. You have probably heard about the explosion in the USA, in Ohio, about those very toxic chemicals. Well, those chemicals are used for making plastics, particularly PVC plastics. So when you have chemicals alone, they're just chemicals. But when you take the molecules of those and mix them with oil molecules, then that's how you get plastics.
yeah,
And so single-use plastics are oil and chemical molecules put together to make something that is not intended for nature, but it can only be used one time.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's what people call virgin plastic, yeah, oil based, crude oil based chemicals. Yeah,
Yes, and that's something very important for people to know is plastics aren't bad. It's just that plastics from oil and toxic chemicals are bad because they do not go back into the earth. If you want to have a farm with rice and trees and flowers, you don't put plastics in the ground. They're not going to do anything for the ground besides make it toxic. You need to have something to put nutrition into the soil. And what I love about Indonesia and also Thailand is that scientists in these countries have already figured out how to make plant plastics.
whether the choice is it is banned totally or it is to manage the waste properly.
You brought up some really good points. So far, we have learned that there are two types of plastic. There are oil plastics and there are plant plastics.
Yeah,
However, plant plastics have a long way to go.
yeah, yeah. It's still being
But
developed.
the root cause of the problem is the behavior of using something only one time and throwing it out.
Yeah,
Now, in nature, we have a lot of one-time products. When a leaf falls from the tree and onto the ground, that is one time. But the systems that we have in nature, they are systems that are circular. When a flower falls to the ground or a fruit or a vegetable, it goes back into the ground as a nutrient, and that can grow more life. This is why I'm a strong proponent of non-toxic bioplastics. But it's really important to know that not all bioplastics are safe. Some use toxic additives in
yeah,
order to create the plastic. So we need a lot more research. And I see Indonesia as being a world power for seaweed-based plastics. However, there will need to be a lot more STEM programs, science programs at our high schools in Indonesia. We need to train Indonesians in engineering, mathematics, chemistry, so that we can leverage our talent and innovate materials just like the USA. When you innovate, that is where you get a strong economy. But right now, the economy of Indonesia is fossil fuels and oil, and that's something that I'll talk about later. And that's the reason why we need to ban plastics. And it's not just me saying this. It's not just me saying this. As a matter of fact, I believe in December, in major mainstream news sources like Bloomberg and Reuters, there was a survey that people of the world, they want single-use plastics banned, but the powers that be are not allowing it. And so we have this question, okay, well, if we're forced to have single-use plastics, and if we're not able to have affordable options other than single-use plastics, then what can we do? And the oil and the fossil fuel and the plastic companies, they are saying, well, you have to do incineration, not recycling.
No.
Incineration.
Yeah.
If you look at the words and the actions, if you look at the words and the actions of our leaders in the industry, their words are, everybody, let's recycle. But their actions are, we're going to make incinerators. So
if you implement incineration to solve your landfill issue, that's wrong approach. But basically, talking about incineration itself, previously we have a standard filter to keep at low level of pollution for these incinerations. How about now? Is the current standard is higher and incineration is not anymore recommended by the pure scientists, or what do you say?
wow, incineration is a complicated issue. Some scientists say that it's bad. Some scientists say that it's good.
Oh,
I think it's very important for people to exercise their critical thinking skills. Anybody can tell you anything. If you want to buy a car, the car salesman will tell you it's a great car, even if it isn't. So we need to learn about these issues so that we can separate the fake news from the real information.
yeah.
And there are organizations such as I can't remember the name, Zero Waste Europe, the Global Alliance for Alternative Generation.
I researched the site of Gaia, Global Incineration Association in US. Yes.
Right. They are a global group of scientists and professionals who have already proven that incinerators are toxic. And not only that, but a recent study by the Zero Waste Europe, they found that making electricity from incineration creates far more CO2, climate changing gases, than making electricity from fossil fuels like natural gas. So it seems that if we think critically, incineration is a technology that people don't want. It's a technology that the fossil fuel industry wants, and scientists who are on the payroll of the fossil fuel industry. It's really important to know about the difference between Sweden and Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
You see, Two things, the climate and the politics. First of all, the climate. The air is very dry in Sweden.
Yeah.
However, the air is really wet in Southeast Asia.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know about you, but if you want to make a fire, it's better if the paper is dry. It's very difficult to put wet paper on fire.
Yeah.
And so what happens with incineration in Southeast Asia is that the machines are operated at lower temperatures, which means that more cancer-causing emissions can come out of it, and that can cause very expensive and life-threatening problems for people who inhale the smoke. And this is why in the United States of America, incinerators are not in white neighborhoods. No, they are in poor neighborhoods with people of color, because white people do not want that toxic technology in their neighborhood. They don't want to breathe that air. So my government puts that toxic technology in less influential neighborhoods. And I see the same thing happening throughout Southeast Asia. We have Asian governments who are saying, hey, incineration is working great in Sweden, let's bring it over here. And because we are not as free as Americans and Europeans are in Asia, there's not much we can do about it. And then we have to breathe all of that toxic chemicals that come out of it.
Yeah, but you mentioned something about our wet climate. So, are you saying that the toxic risk is lower in the countries with wet climate, like Southeast Asia? For
incineration machines to run as safe as possible, you have to burn all of the trash at a certain temperature. But incineration is a for-profit technology. It has to be profitable because you need a lot of fossil fuels to power the machine, to make a lot of fire, to burn the trash. And because Southeast Asia's climate is very humid, our waste has more water. And because our waste has more water, the incineration machine needs to use more fossil fuels to make the fire stronger.
Yes.
And that makes the machine not profitable.
Yeah, I see.
Yes, and you talked about downcycling. That's something very important to understand very well, because metal and glasses, they can be recycled infinitely. However, for plastics cannot be recycled forever. They can only be recycled a short number of times before they have to be incinerated or buried in a landfill. However, new news from the plastics industry is that they claim they can make plastics infinitely recyclable. But what the public needs to know is that this is achieved through chemical recycling, and chemical recycling pollutes our waterways. Like, chemicals are liquids, and after you're done with a liquid, it has to go somewhere. And we are seeing chemical recycling factories being banned in some locations throughout the West.
Yeah.
And where will these technologies end up? Most likely in other countries that have weaker environmental laws, such as the ones we see in Asia. And that's a really good point that you brought is downcycling. I mean, downcycling just prolongs the amount of time something will eventually end up into landfill. And that's why we need innovations of new materials that can go back into the ground. while also reusing and refilling things as much as possible. So it's going to take a change of culture.
Yeah.
So maybe incineration, we should be focusing on how can we change our culture. And this is not something I think that Indonesia can copy from Nepal, or Thailand can copy from Korea, or Germany can copy from the USA. We really need to think about ways that we can improve our society so that we have a zero waste or zero trash society, as much as possible, at least.
Well, that's
So let's talk about pyrolysis. What is it? To give a cooking example, imagine that you put rice in a tall pot, and then you put a cover on the pot. Then you turn the heat on high below the pot. What's going to happen? Well, the heat is going to break apart the molecules of the rice, and you're going to get a lot of smoke inside of the pot, and pressure is going to build up.
Yeah.
That's what pyrolysis is. Pyrolysis uses extreme heat and pressure in a contained area with no oxygen to break apart the molecules of
I see.
unrecyclable plastics. But the problem is that, just like with incineration, it doesn't matter if it has filters or not, because the laws of physics tell us that matter cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be transformed. So in incinerators, you get ash, similar to when you barbecue. When you barbecue, you get that black powder at the bottom of the barbecue. It's the same with pyrolysis and incineration. For pyrolysis, it's called char, and it's very toxic, and it has to be contained. But what's happening is that the oil industry wants to put this toxic black powder in our roads, where it will eventually pollute our waterways. They want to make like things out of it that we use in society, and it shouldn't be used like that. It should be treated like nuclear waste, in my opinion. It needs to be contained and landfilled. So no matter what you do, plastic products end up landfilled. And if they're not landfilled in the ground, then they end up landfilled in our bodies as microscopic dust called particulate matter, or also microplastics. So pyrolysis is not a solution, and it is a technology being promoted in the USA by ExxonMobil, one of the largest oil producers in the world.
Yeah, I see. Also, that's how it works. Yeah. And you also talk about energy recovery. What sort of solution, energy recovery that you mentioned?
Energy recovery is so stupid, man. Energy recovery is incineration. It's the same thing. The only difference is that electricity is created from the steam of the trash after it's burned, kind of like a windmill. In some countries that they have a windmill, it spins around, and when the wind spins the blade around, there's like an alternator. The same thing in your car. It creates DC electricity. It spins around, and there's magnets, and that's how you create electricity. It's a similar technology. So when the steam, when the toxic chemical steam in the incinerator rises, it spins these generators, and that creates electricity. But
so it becomes turbine.
Before again,
it becomes steam turbine. It is used to run steam turbine.
Yes. So waste to energy or energy recovery or any word with the word recovery or power that has to do with waste is basically incineration, but it's incineration that makes a little bit of electricity.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so it's actually what they call WTE, the waste to energy solution. That's basically incineration also. Yeah.
Yes, and it's taking jobs away from waste pickers, people who go through the trash and take out recyclables. And it's also making it more difficult to recycle because governments are incentivized to burn plastics instead of recycle them. Because, like I said before, waste to energy, energy recovery, pyrolysis, and incineration, these are all for-profit toxic technologies. They need to have constant trash all the time. And that's a problem in Sweden. In Sweden, they're taking trash from Norway and they're taking trash from other countries because those are for-profit machines. The machines have to keep running, which means the machines are always creating toxic black ash that needs to be properly contained.
Yeah, because a couple of years ago I read about that even the United Nations mentioned that 3 of the 17 SDGs are met by solution like what they implement in Sweden, the waste to energy. But that was a couple of years ago. Now, I think even the United Nations is not recommending it anymore, yeah.
That's right. The more we learn about incineration and the more that we get fossil fuel lobbyists out of our politics, the more we become informed and the more we learn the truth. And the truth is that we cannot continue a oil-based plastic world. We cannot continue a fossil fuel world. And there are many, many creative and amazing options that we have available, but it's difficult because we're fighting with very powerful industries.
Yeah. So we can say that if 1 or 2 decades ago they were promoting recycling, now people are exposed that it's actually 9% of the plastic is actually can be recycled, economically enough to be recycled. Now as the whole world, almost the whole world already aware of it, then they're promoting incineration. Is that how we see it?
Yes, and that is the scary part. Like you said before, in only the USA, since World War II, when my government brought plastics into mass production, from then until now, only 9% of plastics have been recycled. And I think that's really scary because the majority of the world is not democratic. So if recycling is failing in the United States of America, what does that say for the rest of the world? And the answer is clear. It says that plastics are ending up in our ocean. A recent study found that 80% of ocean plastics are coming from Asia and Southeast Asia. And this is largely due to politics, in my opinion. When a government does not provide waste management to people, they have only 2 options: litter or burn. And I think it's no surprise why we see so many ocean plastics and also a lot of air pollution in the global east as a result of this neglection of access to waste management, which is something we all should have. That should be a basic human right in the 21st century.
Yeah, we have exposed that history in our 14th Tayangan number 14, yeah, about the history. It starts from the World War II, but after the war is over, then the whole petrochemical are focusing to commercial and even promoting to the developing countries. But currently, I also I forgot, I even read somewhere or I heard it from you that even the plastic production are mostly in Asia currently. They have built the petrochemical. We have petrochemical factory also here in Jakarta surrounding. So yeah,
Yeah, World War II was a really big turning point for humanity. Not only did it bring the US to become a world power, as a lot of Europe became bankrupt after the war, but we also see a rise of oil nations. So, with most of Southeast Asia gaining their independence after World War II, we also see Southeast Asia rising up economically into middle income countries.
yeah,
But what a lot of people don't know is that rise in income in Southeast Asia came from fossil fuels. Some of the biggest fossil fuel governments in the world include China, India, Malaysia, and Indonesia. And in Indonesia, 50% of oil is drilled from Sumatra, and it's processed in Singapore, in Thailand. And so we have this very strong fossil fuel economy in a mostly non-democratic part of the world, where people find it very difficult to hold their governments accountable. And so again, like it makes sense why we see plastic production increasing, why we see oil production increasing, why we see more plastics in the ocean, more climate change.
yeah,
And when I look in the news, I see a lot, like 90% maybe, of news stories about America sending trash to Indonesia or Canada sending trash to Malaysia. But no one is talking about how the global East, the most populated part of the world, is a top plastic producer, how they have oil NOCs, national oil countries. That means that the government own oil production. We're not talking about that, and yet we all share this planet. So I really don't know how we're going to meet sustainable development goals of cutting CO2 emissions in half if all eyes are only on the global north, but there's very little attention in Western media to the global south.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Anyway, the world has two major challenges now: finding alternative, plant-based alternative, develop them to be able to one day replace our fossil-based plastic, and another thing is alternative energy alternative to replace the fossil-based we are using for many decades already. Okay, Ken, it's been very rich discussion. We learn a lot from you. Very simple thinking, but everything is makes sense. Thank you for your time again. I think we are our time is up. So next time, if we have another chance, we will make an appointment again. Okay.
Thank you very much. Terima kasih.
Thank you. Have a good day, Ken. Good to meet you today. Thank you. Bye.
Blood will flow, and flesh and still on, drying in the color of the evening sun. Tomorrow's rain won't wash the stain away, but something in our minds will always stay. Perhaps this final act was meant to splints and lifetime's arguments, and nothing comes from violence, and nothing ever could. For all those born beneath an angry star, lest we forget how fragile we are. On and on, the rain will fall like tears from the sky, like tears from the star. On and on, the rain will say how fragile we are, how fragile we are.